welcome back. As I told you, this is a two-parter today for Music Wednesdays. We had Karen Mills on earlier, and now I'm so honored to finally have as a guest Deacon Bluz.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I didn't know it was 10 o'clock in the day.
I know, yeah.
But good to be here.
I appreciate you
All right, brother.
making special time.
All right.
You've got a show coming up, which is why we're talking.
Yeah, I've got a couple of shows. The show we're talking about comes up October the 4th at UTC as a part of their series.
River City Sessions.
The River City Sessions.
I was fortunate enough to go to the first one with Mitch Ryder, and I can tell everybody, awesome venue, going to be a great show. You're going to sing, tell stories, do what you do, right?
I'm going to bring a group in called the Blue Goose Holler Crew. And we're going to sing, we're going to tell some lies, tell a few stories, because I'm working this group out of the black folkloric tradition. So there may be a sermon, there may be a joke, there may be a work song, there may be a field holler, but we are mining the canon of the black folkloric tradition in this group called the Blue Goose Holler Crew. And I named them the Blue Goose Holler Crew because of the geographical location in Chattanooga where Bessie Smith is from and where my mother kind of grew up on the side of. Blue Goose Holler is an area right behind the now Chattanooga Whiskey Company on the side of Cameron Hill. Right. And back in the 20s, that's where a lot of African Americans lived in Chattanooga. So I've got a song I'm doing called the Blue Goose Holler Blues. And another song actually called Rivers and Battlefields, which is an autobiographical song of growing up under Jim Crow. And I just recently finished recording down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana with the Grammy Award-winning Mr. Kenny Neal. Right. So I've been extremely busy. The old career is finally picking up. You know, I started in this business when I was 4 years old over here at WDEF Channel 12, singing the Yellow Rose of Texas. So that's 4 from 60. That's 66 years. So it's been a pretty good career.
Do you mind the autobiographical song? There's so much to talk about. Let me see how quickly I can get through this. We had a fortunate one time to spend several minutes with you at Songbirds during an event. And folks, if you ever want to hear just story after story, Deacon can do it.
Thank you.
But you started singing that song for my wife and I. Mm. Do you mind doing a little bit of that right now?
That song is called Help Me.
Help Me.
When I went down to Louisiana to get my business fixed. You liked that, don't you?
I liked it a lot.
We'll see if we can make it work. Now, okay, right here.
And see if you recognize any of this stuff, people.
This is a song, actually, that was done by Sonny Boy Williamson. And he had been over in England living, and Mick Jagger and some of the Rolling Stones were really taking care of him. But he decided to come home, and everybody said, why you gonna come home, Sonny Boy? You're living over in England, you're wearing bowler hats like this one, and you're living good. Sonny Boy said, I came home to die. So for the next 6 months of his life, him and a man named Houston Stackhouse would go around the Mississippi Delta, and they would do a song. I'll see if I can do it by myself. Let's see. Called Help Me. You got to help me. I can't do it by myself. You got to help me. I can't do it by myself. If you don't help me, got to find myself somebody else. Or when I walk, you walk with me. Or when I talk, you talk to me. I said, oh, baby, I can't do it by myself. If you don't help me, I gotta find myself somebody else. That's how that song go. But then I tell a story in the song. There was a green-eyed girl in Atlanta that put something in my food, and it affected my nature, so my jingling went dingling, and I had to go down to Mississippi, Clarksdale, Mississippi, and see a woman named Miss Upshaw so she could fix my business. And so when I got there, Miss Upshaw's house, it was late, about 12:30 one night, over behind, actually it was behind Red's. It was next to the graveyard and the river. Her house was behind that. So if you look one way, you see the graveyard, the other way you see Red's and the river. So when I got there, I knocked on the door 3 times. The door opened real slow. And there was a wash tub with a gold coin in it, and I had to step across that wash tub with that gold coin. And she said, Deacon Bluz, I know why you're here. Take off your shirt. And when you take off your shirt, I want you to lay down with your navel towards the center of the earth. So I took off my shirt and I laid down toward the center of the earth. And then she took out a piece of chalk and she drew a circle around the 9 points of man on my body. And I'm laying there and I'm sweating and I'm just laying there. And I said, you gotta help me. I can't do it by myself. So later on that night, she took out some candles and she put about 9 candles around my body. And the candles was burning. I'm laying there and I can't keep nothing on my stomach. And then she started walking around me. And I looked up and she had a chicken in her hand. And she came over to me. She said, now lay still, Deacon. And she took a razor and she cut the chicken's throat and she poured the blood of the chicken all down my back. And I just laid there. And the room started to move, and then she blew some hoofy dust over my head. And then she said, Ula ma shana la la la, ula ma shana la 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 la. And I laid there. And then she rolled me over and she put a piece of watermelon in my mouth and it stayed down. And then she gave me a grape. And it stayed down. And I stood, and my nature came back. Oh, she had cured me. So I paid Miss Upshaw, and I got on the phone, and I called that girl I knew down in Mobile, and I said, bring me my nice shirt. Put on your morning gown. I said, bring me my nice shirt. Put on your morning gown. I don't feel no ways tired. The deacon just wanna lay down. You got to help me. Can't do it by myself. I've decided to start mining the black folkloric tradition, and the black folkloric tradition is extremely rich. And what has created the black folkloric tradition is actually the pressure, like creating a diamond. Let me explain. I approach the blues as a secular spiritual. In other words, it talks about what's going on in the here and now. I also look at the European philosophies of existentialism. Now, if you know anything about that, it means they're looking for the truth, but the truth is not the same for everybody because the world is absurd in the abstract. But in the blues, it's conceptually real. In other words, the black experience in America has been one that can be characterized as a bit of absurdity. The violence, the oppression, the things that have happened. So out of this absurdity came a secular song that describes it and talks about it in so many ways. I've got a favorite form that's called the toast. And there are other poems. For example, there's irony in living in this absurdity. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. A body was pulled from the Chattahoochee River. There were 2 holes where the eyes used to be. The hands were handcuffed, the feet were set in concrete. The testicles were cut off. When the body was pulled from the river, the local sheriff and crew found it. And the sheriff called up the local civil rights minister and said, Reverend, we done found one of your people. And it's the worst case of suicide we done ever seen in this part of the county. And the sounds of Conway Twitty were on the microphone as he hung up the phone. That's the blues. Good morning, Captain. Good morning, Shine. Good morning, Captain. Good morning, Shine. The Mule Skinner Blues. But inside that Mule Skinner Blues, Shine could be back there saying, Captain, Captain, he's so mean. He the meanest captain I ever. What you say, boy? Captain, he's so clean. He the cleanest captain I ever did see. That comes off the work games because a lot of the blues has been generated by some very, very absurd conditions of the prison industrial complex. You know, ever since Africans have been brought to America, there's been a penitentiary, the slave ship. And now we live in a time of mass incarceration. So that whole history has been one of chains and absurdity once again. So the whole thing is absurd. It's like living in a fairy tale. You know the dragon's out there, so you better get ready to become the hero. If you don't, you're a victim.
Right. Sharing the history. I wanted to ask you because this week everybody's talking about country music. Ken Burns is.
Oh yeah, very good program so far.
How important that is, and how what I'm hearing from people is they're so glad he's doing it because it's saving these stories.
Oh yeah,
saving this song. So
it's doing more than that. It's also showing that there is true diversity, and America is more to me a welding shop than a melting pot. For example, if you follow the Ken Burns story, you begin to look at the contributions that all ethnic groups have made. And he tells the story of the harmonica player, DeFord Bailey. There's another guy in there that I forgot his name last night. He remembered all the songs and went and wrote them down. And there's a sharing between all of these forms of working class music. I'll tell you a story Little Milton told me about Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley loved to hang out in the hood with the brothers. If you notice the way he dressed, and they all shopped at a place called Lansky's in Memphis. Elvis dressed like a black street player. But also Elvis liked black women. And supposedly there may be a little black Elvis running around Memphis, but the Colonel kept him away from those scenes a lot because he knew Elvis had an affinity for black women and the black lifestyle. And Little Milton said in when he was around them, he was just one of them. He liked being with them. And I think this Colonel Parker had a lot to do with trying to destroy Elvis's image and positive standing in the black community. Because I've never seen Elvis as anything but a straight up soulful singer. And that's why, and I think he treated all people the same. And I know for one, if you looked at his female background singers, he always had black women. He always had sisters. So the country music is good. I think that's why, and I'm very much involved in the Americana movement, by the way.
Which is why I'm holding this. I want to get back
I spoke at the Americana Fest on the black folkloric tradition. So the music's in America starting to come together. You know, you're getting the bluegrass kids meeting the hip-hop kids, you're getting gangsta grass. You're getting this kid, Lil Nas, getting with Billy Ray Cyrus, and you get another sound. So I'm looking forward to what's going to come out of Nashville. And I'm also looking forward to continue to watch the Ken Burns program because I have learned so much, even as a musician. I learned the difference between BMI and ASCAP. I saw what happened to, the harmonica player I'm talking about.
I can't think of his name. But
I saw what happened to DeFord Bailey.
A lot of people talk about how they didn't realize Jimmy Rogers, the importance of Jimmy
Rogers.
Oh,
man. Let me tell you what I did. I listened to Jimmy Rogers the other night. And I heard it, but there's also a black Jimmy Rogers that I want people to listen to that predates all of Junior Wells and Buddy Guy. I don't know what happened. I think he went to the penitentiary for killing somebody, but you got to go listen to the black Jimmy Rogers also. But the white Jimmy Rogers was a hell of a musician. Yeah. Most of the guys on that program were great musicians. I didn't realize that Hank Williams had died so young and under such bad circumstance. 29 years old,
driving through
full of morphine and chlorine and whatever he could get his hands on. Bless his heart.
Yeah, and the thing about him is Nashville kicked him out time after time. Didn't want him, and now they hold him up.
But the people love him. But the people
because he was real.
Love him because his lyrics spoke to really what's happening.
Exactly.
And that's why I try as a songwriter now to capture things that are just around me. I wrote this song called Rivers and Battlefields. And it's about being born on the banks of the Tennessee River, growing up on the Civil War battlefield. I was born in the segregated colored section of Erlanger Hospital, and I grew up on Orchard Knob. Orchard Knob was an important battlefield during the Civil War. November 1863. Was the Battle of Chattanooga, and Grant stayed there. Well, I grew up on that place, and I talked about growing up under Jim Crow and how I didn't become a Jim Crow fool because there were people all around me teaching me how to read and write. The old men showed me how to put up my dukes in a fight. When I became a man, I left my Chattanooga home. I went everywhere from Tokyo to Rome. But the road home is long, and I came back to be Chattanooga strong. And that's part of the song, born on the banks of the Tennessee River, raised on the Civil War battlefield.
You, for the most part, intentionally, right, have made it a mission to gather and save the Chattanooga history. We're talking about the country music, but you've been doing that for Chattanooga music and its history for a long time.
Well, I've been doing it since I've been home. I'm trying to recover exactly what happened. And so far, I've got a skeleton model of the music. All right. First, after the Civil War, there were instruments that were left that became part of one of the first colored brass bands that came out of Camp Contraband, which is on the north side of the river, right near Coolidge Park. After that, say between the 1880s and the Depression, there were a series of bars and places in Chattanooga for musicians to play. Pine Street, Pine Street was alive, there were a lot of bars up Pine Street. There was a bar where the Solomon Building is, run by this guy, Lovell, who we've discovered was of mixed heritage. And he had a saloon there, and across the street where the Volunteer Building is, was a barber shop, but it was run by black barbers, but they didn't cut black people's hair. Out of that came Norris Herndon, who went on to Atlanta to start Atlanta Life and become one of the richest people in America. But the barbers at that time usually had only white clientele. But back to the stories of the music. Then the music went to West 9th Street and East 9th Street. In the late teens and early 20s, it wouldn't be anything unusual to see not only Bessie Smith, but a lot of kids singing from the top of the hill near Cameron Hill all the way down 9th Street, singing and working on their acts. People don't realize, though, that Bessie Smith's brother, a little older than her, worked on his act, but he took his act to the 81 Theater in Atlanta, which was like the Apollo of the South, and Bessie eventually follows him. Let me explain that. The 81 Theater was a movie theater that also had let you have live acts on stage. And that was a place you went to make it or get thrown off the stage. After that, you get the post-war era in Chattanooga with the music. The music speeds up. The man's name is Louis Jordan, and there was another man named Chick Webb. They talk about him in that country music documentary. My folks talked about him a lot because I had a great uncle on my father's side, probably at the turn of the century. His name was Pet White, and Pet was a barrel house piano player around this west side of town. But in the 40s, the music came back, and Chattanooga was very unique in several ways. One, it produced had something to do with the production of a number of jazz musicians, like the late John Vaughn, Lamont Vaughn's father, who played with Illinois Jacquet. Jimmy Blanton had a relationship here in Chattanooga with some and I went by the house of the Blanton twin sisters here. And then we produced a number of musicians. So by the late 50s, early 60s, on a typical night in Chattanooga, and I lived this as a kid, there were 4 or 5 places on M.L. King, 9th Street, where musicians were working. I have a friend that just moved back here, William Gale Peake, Billy Peake. He started playing on the street when he was 14. Skylar Tribal, who went on to become a music executive at CBS, started playing on the street when he was 14. They played all up and down that street and made better money then than we make now. You also had the funky drummer, and there is a theoretical explanation to the funky drummer. Let me tell you what he told me. I asked him about that beat on Cold Sweat. Clyde Stubblefield. He said that beat came from sitting at the train yard down here that runs through Chattanooga and listening to that clickety-clack of the trains. But also, if you remember in Cold Sweat, there's a pop, 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 pop. Well, there used to be a plant called Standard Coochie Thatcher that was next to Lincoln Park. And when we were growing up, that plant would go off every 4 or 5 minutes with that pop, pop, pop. So Clyde said he took the boom, cha, boom, boom, cha, boom, pop, boom, boom, pop, boom, boom, pop, pop, from the trains here and from the factory over there. So that's the scientific explanation for the history of Cold Sweat. But now remember, black male sartorial dressing styles also were heavily influenced around the whole country by Chattanooga. Why? We were an urban hip town. We wore ties and we were real slick. The Impressions. So if you listen to the music of the Impressions and look at the way they dressed, and with Jerry Butler, they were setting a whole tone. So this town has made a lot of contributions to the music, from people like Roland Carter to Bessie Smith to Roland Hayes. There's a guy that I also want to explore. Yeah, what's his name? Oh hell, he was Tiny Kennedy. Nobody knows about Tiny. Tiny Kennedy was a blues singer. Disappeared, reappears in the 1970s in black exploitation gangster movies. But Tiny Kennedy sang a song, "I'm Just a Big Old Country Boy." So I could go on and on, but I really want people to be, I want musicians to be much more conscious of the history of the music.
Exactly.
And just going out and just playing something. But, be able to put it in a context.
I had Fred and Sam from the Impressions on a couple weeks ago. They're retired. It's incredible that Clyde, as you said, funky drummer with James Brown, if people are unfamiliar. There's a lot of history that's come out of here.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of it being made today. The show on the 4th are you going to do a lot of introduction of the songs
the show on the 4th is basically going to be a lecture demonstration at the university. I'm going deep into the black folkloric tradition with a group called the Blue Goose Holler Crew. Right. So we plan to really bring a great selection of Americana songs and storytelling. Because I think I have something to give as a storyteller and a lecturer too. Absolutely. So part of my whole thing is edutainment. I want you to have a good time, but I want you to learn something.
Yeah. We need to get all this stuff recorded so we can pass it on, just we were talking about country music.
Yeah.
Will you do me a favor? We could do this all day, but will you do me a favor and play something or sing something?
Well, can I tell a toast? I want to tell a toast. I don't want to, because I don't have much of a solo act. Back in 52, when times was hard, he carried a Colt 45 and a deck of cards, rat-drawn shoes and an old Stetson hat. He had a 48 Ford on the curb with payments on that. His woman put him out in the ice and snow, and she said, "Baby, don't you come back here no more." He hadn't had no loving in a long, long time, so he had to play with Jody, and it didn't cost him a damn. He walked through the rain, and he walked through the mud, till he came to a place called the Bucket of Blood. He said to the bartender, "Don't you know who I am?" And the bartender said, "No, and I don't give a good damn." Well, those were the last words that the bartender said, because Stagg pulled his pistol and shot him 4 times in the head. Just then in the bar walked a gal named Millie Brown, the finest gal in the whole damn town. She leaned across the bar and she pulled up her skirt, just the way that girl loved to flirt. She looked up the bartender and said, "He can't be dead." Stagg said, "You count them 4 holes in his big fat head." She looked at Stagg and said, "You look like you ain't had no loving in a long, long time. You better come over to my house. It won't even cost you a dime. But I got to tell you one thing before you begin. You got to be gone when Billy Dilly come in." He said, "I'll be not gone when Billy Dilly comes in. I'll be there when Billy Dilly comes to pass. If I have to, I'll kick Billy Dilly square up in his aspirin bottle." So they started to make love, and he felt her heart. He said, "What's the matter, darling?" She said, "Oh, I'm just coming, sweetheart." All of a sudden, Billy Dilly kicked the door in. Stagg said, "You better play like you did, because I'm getting ready to put 4 bullet holes in your head," and shot him 4 times. She opened her eyes and she screamed. She said, oh, Ed, Stagg, you just freed me." He said, "Baby, that's why they call me Stagger Lee." That's the Battle of Stagger Lee, y'all. That's called a toast. A toast is a form of song that you can really find in the Irish tradition. Sometimes a bit vulgar, sometimes a bit ribald, told by men on corners and in prison cells or wherever they could be. Comes out of the joke tradition. A lot of black vaudeville, a lot of black comedians get a lot of their stuff from the toast. That was a story that even old Frederick Douglass used to tell a story when he was going around to the abolitionist meetings. Fred Douglass told this story about this prominent white woman was at a church social, and she must have drunk the wrong thing, and she fell out and dreamed that she was in heaven. But when they woke her, the good sister up, they said, wake up, wake up. She said, oh, I've been to heaven. They say, did you see any people? And she said, oh, I saw all kinds of people in heaven. They say, well, did you see any colored people in heaven? She said, no, because I didn't go in the kitchen. You can laugh. So that's what we're going to be doing. October the 4th at UTC at what time? Let's say 7 p.m. You just be there.
Put it in the text.
Show your face in the place.
It's at Cadek Hall, which is a gorgeous place.
Right.
Deacon, thank you so much. Are we going to do this again?
Oh, we got to. I want to do it with my band, though. I want to bring a band and do it.
We'll do it.
All right, then. Thank you. We got it. We got so much.
Thank y'all for watching. Thanks, everybody.
Everybody say love. Deacon Bluz. Love you, too. Thank you.